Hi, good morning, NRI Samay listeners. I hope you had a wonderful week and have a relaxing and pleasant weekend with an informative NRI Samay show. Like every weekend, this week also we have an incredible guest with us. He belongs to the new age of investigating journalism with sting operations using spy cams. If we go back to 1999-2000, from exposing the cricket match-fixing scandal to the recent money laundering scandal with the Operation Red Spider, the person behind it, Aniruddha Bahal, he is with us. He is from Cobra Post. And with you, your weekend host, Akshay Kumar Enugu from Florida. Thanks, Aniruddha ji, for joining with us on NRI Samay Weekend Show.
Namaskar.
You are actually one of the person behind this Tehelka in which you exposed the cricket match-fixing scandal back in 1999-2000. So, can you explain us a little bit more on how you got into this investigative journalism mode and especially with the sting operation? Because that was the first of its kind at that time, right?
I don't distinguish between stories and stories where you use hidden cameras. They are all stories. In some stories, maybe you need hidden cameras because the nature of the story is such that you wouldn't get to write about the story in a normal way. With respect to how I got into it, I first became a journalist sometime in 91. And actually before that I was a novelist. And I became a journalist because I thought that was the way that I could support my fiction writing. But along the way, journalism itself became so interesting that the two have now sort of become intertwined with my sort of life.
Even with your expose back in 99-2000, BCCI imposed a ban on cricketers Mohammad Azharuddin and Ajay Jadeja and Ajay Sharma. So with the kind of evidences that you provided, was it enough for having any legal action on them, or did you have any chance to have a follow-up on that?
Yeah, we did that at that point of time, and that was after a lot of struggle, after a lot of sort of public uproar. And you should remember that in 97, when we first broke the cricket match-fixing story in Outlook magazine, the BCCI sued us for 5 crores, and nobody believed us. And it took a lot of time and many stories for the people to come around and it to be the other way. And BCCI, like all institutions, is not eager at all to listen to anything that may be wrong with them.
After that, it looks like you actually exposed one of the biggest threats for India's national security, which is the defense contract scam with the fictitious West End company.
That was in 2001, and that story basically had to do with defense procurement, and we exposed it, saying, the shady things that happen in defense procurement, and ours was a fictitious product, and we wanted to show how people along the whole value chain sort of feed on the gravy train, and at that time, Operation West End was quite a revelation in the sense of, for the first time, people saw how corruption sort of took place on video. So that was very unusual for them, and that was the reason for the big sort of gasp that the nation took collectively, perhaps.
For instance, after you exposed the biggest scam, which actually had the ruling party's president at the time, Bangar Lakshman, and everyone were exposed with that, followed by he resigned, and even the defense minister, George Fernandez, resigned from his cabinet post. So I was reading somewhere that, government was pushing really hard on the team which actually exposed that scam, and you were imprisoned for a week for the investigation and all these things. So how was it after exposing the scam? What was the government reaction on that?
I wasn't imprisoned. They manufactured a lot of false cases on us. They set up a commission of inquiry whose sole purpose was to delve into how the story was done rather than what the story brought about. They sort of hoisted a false poaching case against one of our reporters. They hoisted an Official Secrets Act case against some of our journalists, including me. So that was just the vicious manner in which a state sort of reacts when it is exposed. I mean, we are perhaps seeing the same thing in the Snowden issue, and in the sense of initially trying to paint him as a villain, etc., etc. But that was a normal thing, and some of the cases are still going on. So, I mean, that is a part and parcel of anybody who chooses to do stories which rattle the state.
So I guess even after this exposure of the scam, was that the reason of so much push behind the Tehelka? Later you came and you started the Cobra Post.
That's right. I mean, Cobra Post I started sometime in 2003. So it's been nearly 10 years with Cobra Post as well. And I wanted to stick to investigative journalism on stories and as a niche, and that's what I've continued doing, apart from my fiction writing.
You had written an open editorial column in one of the leading newspapers, which was talking about, money for asking questions in Parliament. And actually after you have written that article, some of the parliamentarians, they said this is just a false allegation, and some of them, they were trying to take an illegal action. So after that, you have proved with that Operation Duryodhana that in fact it happens in the Parliament, and 10 of Lok Sabha MPs and one of Rajya Sabha MP were caught on camera with this exposure. So can you actually explain us a little more on that, how exactly it did happen?
That was a story we did in the year 2005, and somewhere in the middle of that year I had written a column saying that hidden cameras should be used for more serious concerns and not for flippant stories like the one India TV used hidden cameras doing a casting couch story, which was a pretty sort of not the way that hidden cameras should have been used. So pursuant to that story, I got a notice from the Indian Parliament saying that I had maligned it. And that's what triggered me off to prove to them that it really did happen. And then we did get many MPs talking to us and who took money from us to ask questions in the Indian Parliament. And the questions were, most of them were pretty ludicrous and for non-existent organizations. And so we had this rather comic aspect of these ridiculous questions landing up in the well of the Parliament, and the MP subsequently got in trouble after the inquiry, and they were all dismissed from Parliament, and they went and contested the dismissal in the Supreme Court, where they lost. So everything stood.
Later, coming into this, the latest expose of Operation Red Spider, actually, whenever the word actually money laundering, people have very less understanding about this money laundering. So can you actually explain us in basic terms that what exactly happened with all these more than 25 national or government or international banks which are involved in this money laundering? Can you explain us a little more in basic terms that what exactly is happening in the system? It is something like the Switzerland is or the Swiss bank is brought into India, right? On those lines. So, can you explain us a little more about this money laundering activities that are happening in India?
Money laundering is basically when you get in illegal money or criminal money into the system. So, when we came to know that all this was happening, our reporter went to banks pretending to be a sort of aide to a politician, and he said that his politician had a lot of black money to make to make clean, and could they help him with the process? And the banks jumped in, and the personnel of the banks jumped in, and they sort of gave a whole list of processes by which they could launder that money, which was sometimes 50 lakhs in size, sometimes 4 crores in size, or sometimes 5 crores, nearly $1 million in size. And they hatched a lot of schemes about how they could put that cash into insurance products, how they could, help him buy gold with that, how they could help the politician hide that money from income tax authorities by, they would suggest ways how to break up the amount into smaller sort of figures so that it would go get under the radar, how to open Benami accounts, how to open accounts with the driver's name and their wife's name, so that open multiple accounts, and even stash cash in the lockers in the banks, and they would sometimes even they offer to come and collect the cash from the client's home. So it was all these facts, and this all violated the International Money Laundering Treaty which India has with several nations, and subsequently an RBI inquiry was held where they found all these things happening, and they have now penalized these banks. And of course the penalty is too little, and the RBI also has not really been up to its job, and they're acting more like a protector of the banks than the regulator. But that is a different issue. That is another matter altogether. But this is the first time that a media house picked up, because largely media houses don't want to annoy the financial system because they get lots of loans from them. They get sponsorship of events from them, and they sometimes they also have sort of personal stakes or equities in the media companies. So nobody wants to annoy the banks. So this is a story that we had to do alone without partnership with somebody in the initial stages.
Actually, I was reading an article in New York Times which actually says that whenever a person has so much information and wants to expose it, and if he doesn't get an approval or if he cannot pass it through his editor, he actually is going to Arvind Kejriwal to expose and take his help. So I was just wondering, I guess in your operation, Red Spider Part 2, even this Aam Aadmi Party, which was an activist Arvind Kejriwal who turned into a politician, they actually tried to publicize a lot on that. What kind of an help that did you try to reach them? What kind of an help that they did offer for this expose?
They are a political party. They pick up all kinds of issues. I mean, I know them, but it doesn't mean that we have any kind of partnership. So they basically, it's like any other political party, and if they feel that the issue is of interest to them and which will help spread the cause of their party, then they pick up that issue.
Just coming back to this money laundering issue. So as a common man of India or a normal citizen, how does this, this converting black money into white money using this money laundering will affect a common man in India? Either in terms of a tax evasions or all these things. How does it really affect the common man?
It's a very, corruption per se sets back our GDP by nearly 5 to 7%, perhaps more. Second thing is, if all this money had come legitimately into the system, it would increase your tax base, and it would increase the amount of money that the government would have to spend on various welfare schemes. Number three, it is criminal money. Please understand, we don't know the origin of this unless investigation is held. Nobody would know the origin of the black money, whether it is through drugs, whether it is through gambling, whether it is prostitution, whether it is through wildlife killing. So there are poaching, so on and so forth, etc. So there are like nearly many sort of listings which any money deriving from them is called money laundering money. So we don't know, so we can't let criminal money get into the system, or we'll be branded as the banks are that we can't trust our banks. And the moment, and that sort of gets into the heart of the issue, then you would have problems outside. People won't accept money, bank transfers from Indian banks. So it has a snowballing effect. So your banks have to be clean totally. I mean, you don't want your banks to have a reputation of offshore banks.
So it can totally shaken our entire economic strength of the country, right? In a sense?
That's right. I mean, you can't have something which is so insidious that all banks are practicing it in a sort of laissez-faire manner. It is a rule of that money laundering has become so integrated into your financial economy. And in that sense, it's a very dangerous thing to do. And I hope that the story has sort of gone and they have taken remedial sort of methods, and because I still am very doubtful that this will change over some period of time, because it's so ingrained into the financial economy, and because they didn't do any change in the senior management of these banks, which they should have done, and the criminal proceedings should have started against many, but that has not happened. So I'm still very circumspect about how long this will go in sort of protecting our banks from money laundering practices.
Yeah, even it looks like RBI Director Subbarao, he went on to say that as there is no transaction, so no scam has happened, and it is simply nothing, right? That's what his statement. And even it looks like, based on the penalties that were levied on this Axis Bank or ICICI Bank, they were just on know your customer violation rather than any prevention of money laundering act or any IPC section 120 and all these things. So do you think that we can really pursue or we can pressurize this government or this RBI to have criminal cases against them? Because it can be a violation of IPC section 120, right?
No, there are several sections of IPC, not really 120B. That is a criminal conspiracy section. But definitely, I mean, but RBI is not an investigative agency. They are auditors. So if you really want to investigate money laundering, the whole case has to go to Enforcement Directorate, which the government is very shy to do because they know if the Enforcement Directorate comes in, then it becomes really, really sort of bad news for these banks, because then they will really get to the bottom of it and they will charge sheet all the senior management of the banks and they will find out who was doing what, etc., etc. So there is a big amount of behind-the-scenes play going on in trying to protect the banks from enforcement and directorate inquiry sort of thing. But having said that, the income tax, I'm given to understand, is already pursuing hundreds of cases against the facts that have been brought out by us. And they might be instituting some proceedings not only against the people who were money laundering through these banks, but against the banks themselves.
And even it looks like there are some politicians, such as state ministers, are also involved or are also exposed through your scam, right? So was there any political pressure was existing after this exposing the scam, as it happened after exposing that Operation West End scam?
So far, no, but fingers are crossed. I mean, I don't see any sort of pressure. I mean, everybody across the board generally has appreciated the story, even the media as such. So at the moment, I don't see any fallout in that direction, but you never know in India.
Okay. So,
And Cobra Post, as it is, has since last month, Cobra Post has turned non-profit. So earlier it was a production house doing with partnership with different national news channels in India. But right now, Cobra Post since May 2013 has become a non-profit, and our intention is to collect a corpus of funds so that we can continue doing investigative stories in a very, very independent manner, free from commercial pressures of any kind and free from pressures of other normal mainstream commercial organizations.
Oh, okay. So so Cobra Post is completely a non-profit organization from now.
That's right. Okay.
So, and what kind of an investigative journalism or what kind of an operations that we can expect from you in future? Because you have really set a very high standards in this investigative journalism with so many sting operations that you.
So we continue. I mean, investigative journalism is not just about undercover stories. We do a lot of other stories which you should know about, where we don't use hidden cameras, and we use hidden cameras only for special stories where the story wouldn't come out otherwise. And in India, there is a scam hidden under every stone, so to speak. And just being a non-profit will perhaps get us into a place where a zone where we can pursue all these stories in independent manner. So the whole focus is on pursuing investigations for the larger public good and to do stories which mainstream media doesn't do in any case for a variety of reasons, whether it is to do with pressures, that they would be annoying certain sections which advertise with them, that they would be pushing the toes of some people who are sort of have business interests with their ownership, etc., etc. So, or political pressure of some kind. So, I intend to be in a zone which is very different from that.
So it looks like money is also one of the critical parameters even in exposing the scams, right? Like I was reading somewhere.
Yeah, obviously, reporters can't live on thin air. They also have their EMIs. They also have to, earn a good living. So investigative journalism per se needs a lot of money because people need to travel, you need to stay, you need to pursue story leads which may not happen. So it is a bit more expensive than normal reporting.
Yeah, and even I was going through one of the exposure that you had, Operation Western, which was with 11 lakhs, and I was reading somewhere that if you had little more money at the time, you would have actually completely exposed the entire system.
Yeah, that's right. At that time, we did have that feeling.
Even though we have a video evidence against all these things, we are unable to bring them to the justice. I mean, either it can be that cricket match fixing scandal where Andhra Pradesh High Court, it actually lifted the ban on Muhammad Azharuddin in 2012 to this Operation Spider. We are actually unable to give a proper, proper judgment on these things. So how do you think that, how we can use this to bring to a logical conclusion? What is the logical conclusion of this? What it can be?
You just look at the facts. In North America right now, and there are nearly more than 100 investigative non-profits from ProPublica, Center for Investigative Journalism, and so on and so forth, where a lot of philanthropic institutions and philanthropy-minded individuals come forward and give them grants to pursue a lot of good journalism. That is not the case in India. Actually, Cobra Post is the first investigative non-profit, so to speak, and Cobra Post has been commercial for so long, for nearly 10 years, so this gives a lot of rich experience to Cobra Post. So I think we have to create a space where more and more investigative platforms are there, and people are doing more and more stories, so that no sector, whether it is rural reporting, whether it is stories which, as I said, inverted quotes, that are not sexy to report, there's a huge sort of India that doesn't get reported at all, forget investigative reporting. And we need to get into areas and throw our lights on them, and so that we can really get to the bottom of things, and which is what will lead to a lot of money being spent in the right direction. Because unless you don't have pesky reporters, your democracy is never healthy. So the health of your investigative reporting and your pesky reporters basically determines the health of your democracy.
And for example, if anyone would like to contribute for the Cobra Post, either through monetary donations or through any any camera or any logistics, how they can approach you or how can they donate it? Can you just tell?
Unfortunately, we can't take cash contributions from outside, only from India. So if they have any friends and relatives who want to contribute from within India, they are more than welcome. As far as maybe in the future we become a subscription site or portion of our site is subscription, then I would love it that some of them bought some subscriptions. But I think they're well wishes, and if they send story ideas and if they can exhort their friends, and if they are NRIs and PIOs, I think that that can also help.
Okay. And so how are you trying to expand this Cobra Post? Like, what are the other areas that you are looking to expand?
So right now I'm on a fundraising drive, and a lot of whether I'm able to hire more reporters or not will depend on the amount of money that I'm able to raise. So it's a long haul at the moment.
Okay. And it looks like there was an expose on Operation Red Spider 3 with the support of CNN, IBN. So how the other media channels are supporting Cobra Post and your journalism?
No, they often, I must say that they regularly follow Cobra Post stories, and a lot of them gave the money laundering story a lot of exposure, perhaps not as much as required, but still, I think that they did the best that they could do under the circumstances. So, it's a live and learn, but the whole world is moving on the web, so I intend to create sort of web property where if we do a story and we can sort of beam directly to the smartphone and we can develop our own audience, which is we don't need mainstream media after that. So that is the zone that I want to be in a few years from now.
Okay. So actually, going back to your, novel. I mean, you used to be a novelist, right? Before you became a journalist. So how does that novelist and all this thinking that help you in this journalism and investigating journalism? Because novelist is like more of a creative job, right? So how does that help you over here in bringing out the stories? Do you have any experience?
I think they're two different worlds, but I guess I inhabit both worlds, and it makes it easy because I've experienced so much of life, so perhaps a bit of that can go into my novels. And my last novel came out in 2010. It was called The Emissary. It was a historical novel based in ancient Greece during the time of Alexander the Great. And I'm working now on another novel set in Iraq and a comic as well. So hopefully I shall finish them soon.
Thank you, Aniruddha ji. Do you have any message for our NRI Samay listeners who are actually, who wants to contribute for something or other thing of what good is happening in India?
Oh, I think, I really love the sentiment and that they are sort of connected with what is happening in India. I think they should remain connected, and I think they should drum up the issues that they feel strongly about and write to the politicians whom they feel they can influence or of their particular constituencies. And I think it does make a difference. And the very fact that they are still sort of connected with what is happening in India and is itself a big positive note. And I wish all of them the very best of luck.
Thanks, Aniruddha ji. So,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So this is what we heard from Aniruddha ji, and Aniruddha ji is right now on a fundraising drive. If you have someone in India, actually you can inform about all the good work that the Cobra Post has been doing. Either it can be the exposure of Red Spider for the money laundering, or even before that, the Cash for Questions scam. You can pass on these messages to your relatives or friends in India, and please encourage them to support such great initiatives such as Cobra Post. And thank you for listening to our NRI Samay. Have a great day. Thanks, Aniruddha ji.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for choosing Reliance.